answer any questions you might have about DesignShop, pretty much whatever you want to talk about. So, and see if I have the answers. Stump me game, I guess. All right, so let me get the screen up on the other so I can see any questions that are typed in. And in the meantime, if you have questions, remember you can send them in ahead of time to applications@melco.com, or you can, of course, type them in on this feed. So where the live video is, you can add your questions and we'll get them answered the best we can. All right, let me figure out how to make this work. Hang on. I'm on a different computer. No. There. All right. So it sounds like sound is working and we are good to go. I did get a lot of questions sent in, so I'm just going to jump straight into it. And again, if you have questions, don't message them to Melco. I don't see on their Facebook page. I can't see those, but send them over to just as a text on this thread. Okay. Get my phone in case I get any sent out that way. All right. So the first question I had was, I put an applique letter from Stalls and then write text and place it over the letter. Sometimes text goes to the bottom layer. How do I fix this? All right, so let's go over to DesignShop. No, not email. That's lovely. Close. All right, so in DesignShop, I made an applique file with some text. So all this, just to real quick show you what I've got, is we've got a placement stitch. I'll turn all this mess off. So there's my placement. There's the tack down if you have it, and then it does all the cover stitching, right? And then I have the text. Now you'll notice I'm turning these all on and off in this project view over here. So if you don't have the project view, if your screen looks like this, how you would get it is go to View, Project Views, turn on project view, and there it is. So if your text is sewing in weird areas, what you'd want to look at is the order. So in CorelDRAW or in the other programs, you've got layers, right? And the layers stack up however you place them from bottom to top, right? With stitching, it's similar but different, right? So you have you've got layers if you want to think of them that way, but it's really color changes. What sews first, then second, then third, then fourth, all right? So in this case, it's going to sew the lettering first, and then it's going to put the applique letter down. That's not what we want. We want it to sew the applique letter down, and then we put our lettering on top of the letter, on top of the applique. So to fix it, all you have to do is rearrange these layers over here, okay? So to do that, you click on the offending one, so my lettering down here, that I want to go to a different layer, to a different spot, and I left click on it and I drag down. What you'll see that black line that's appearing on my screen? That is where if I let go of it, where it's going to drop. So if I put it there, what happens? Well, I've got to tack down and then lettering. That's not what I want either. I got to get the fabric down first. So I want to keep on dragging it, and I'm going to drag it all the way to the end. So now, just in the order of sewing, I get my 2 running stitches, then I get my satin stitch, which is third, and the very last thing is going to be my lettering. Okay, so answering that particular question is all about just making sure your color order is in the right order for whatever the project you're working on is. Okay, so we had another question that was on FlexOS. I'm trying to set up colors and it skips numbers or jumps numbers. Okay, so what I would check for on that is to make sure you have no blank steps or things that are missing stitch directions. So what I mean by that, let's go back to DesignShop. No questions typed in yet. All right. So I'm going to draw a shape. Now I got more. All right. So that right now, let's say that sews up here. That's actually just a vector. Okay. There's no stitch direction. So when it goes to sew, it's going to sew stitch 3. It's going to get confused over this because it's not actually stitches. And then it's going to go to my lettering. So it's going to appear to jump around weird, even though this is an element there. Another thing that might happen is, what if you have a color that just has a trim in it? There's no stitching, it's just a trim. That's another thing where if you've got these just blank steps, it's going to goof up what you sew or goof up the color changes. So to fix it, all I'd want to do is delete the mystery color change. So that one, all it has in it is a trim. So select it and hit delete. This one, if I really did intend to have that stitching, I got to add a stitch direction to it, right? I can't just sew things that have no stitches on it. That's just a plain vector. All right, so those are the two things I would suggest looking for. Empty steps over here, so ones that just have trims or have lettering with no lettering, complex fills with no stitch direction, things like that, and clean that up or delete the extraneous steps. Okay, what else? Is there a way to tie stitches without a trim so you can just continue on to the next letter? Absolutely. So lettering, I'm just gonna make a messy file. Okay, so if I just zoom in on the lettering, and what we want to look at is our tie-in and tie-off properties right here. Okay, so if you want it to always have a knot, you can change that to always. So I think that's what you're asking. How do you force it to always do a tie-off regardless of the situation? Well, that would be it. Now, if you want to actually avoid the trim, that's this property right here, the auto trim, which is governing whether it's going to trim or not. Okay, so how do you read that though? If you look at your letter, so how did I do that? I clicked on the text, I clicked on the letter S. All right, so now you see a box around it. I also have a green circle, that's where this letter starts. The red X is where it ends. Now, if I click on the next letter, see that green circle? That's where the A starts. And now I've got a propeller down here on the S. That's where my previous element ended. So the distance between where this letter is starting and when this letter ends, if that distance is bigger than whatever number is in this auto trim box, it's going to insert a trim, move to the next spot, and move along. Now, if I make this a big number, notice it just carries the jump stitch. All right, so I can tell it to do auto trims, all of that fun stuff. I can tell it to update. Notice I still have that tie-in stitch right here, but now it does a jump to the next thing. There's no trim there, and that's because this is a big number. All right, so by changing this, you can leave those jumps in for cleaning up later. In general, I like letting my machine do that work, so I tend to set this to somewhere between 20 and 30 points. It's a personal preference. You'll find everyone has different things that they like. But the bigger the number is, the longer of a jump stitch it will leave. All right, and setting it to always will make sure that you always get that tie-in. If you set this to only when necessary, if there's a jump, it wouldn't put the tie-in. Okay, what else? All right, that's all of this. So let's see what else. I have a Maya. When I set up the colors, they don't show what I picked on screen. How do I fix that? All right, there's a few things you need to do. One, if you go to within the OS itself, up at the top, you have Tools Settings, right? So there's the drop downs. So you go Tools Settings. This box clicks up. It's usually on Machine. Click on the Settings tabs, and right here you'll see Use Colors from Design. If you uncheck that box, it will use whatever colors you have assigned to the thread tree. Now remember, you still have to assign colors on your thread tree, otherwise it's going to be irrelevant. It's going to show up all gray unless you assign colors there. But as long as your thread tree is colored, then by unchecking this box, the design will show up however you colored it. So you can double check your work, make sure you colored it right, make sure it looks like what you think it's supposed to look like, things like that. Okay. What else do we have? In the last class, you showed a pattern. This was a question that was on YouTube. Let's see. Can you explain the cross stitch function with a design? Okay, so there's a question typed in. Sure. So let me do this and then I'll come back to that one. So last one, this was typed in on YouTube. I only see the Facebook questions here that some of the guys send me on my phone, the ones on YouTube. So I will do my best to get those answered this time. But this was one that was typed in last time. For this, how did I get that pattern? So how did I create that? So let's go look at it. In DesignShop, I'm gonna get rid of this mess. Say no, new file. I'm going to draw a box. So to do that, I clicked on the Insert Complex Fill. I clicked on the automatic rectangle tool. Left click. Now I have a fill. Not a very interesting fill at the moment, so let's fix that. If I either double click on it or select it, right click, go to Properties, double click over here, it all gets you to the same spot, which is to Object Properties. Now down here, you'll see we have patterns that you can play with. So there's pattern fills, and there's a lot of them in here. They're really fun to work with. I always, whenever I use these, the very first thing I do when I change it to a pattern fill is I come up here and change this to satin. I just like the look of how the fills do, so much nicer. So see how all those extraneous stitches on there went away, and now it's just a straight pattern. So there are a ton of patterns in here. That's not that, it's hearts plural, there we go. So that's the one, and then you can play with your stitch directions, and it looks like I need 180, voila. Okay, so that's how you created. No questions on YouTube yet, great. So Dan's gonna let me know any YouTube questions, so for those who are watching there, excellent. All right, so that's how you add any pattern you want. Now we had a related question was, how do I create my own pattern? So it's fun that I can play with these and the ones that come with the software. And this is one of the tips I showed last time, is playing with these spacings to get different pattern sets and whatnot. Now what I'm doing right now, I would not want to sew without fixing it, because these satin stitches are much too long to sew. That'll be a mess. But just to give you an idea, you can play with all the spacings to get different patterns throughout your whole shape that you have here. Now to create your own design, first off, you got to draw your shape. So I'm going to be boring and draw a triangle. An ugly triangle at that. That's okay. All right, so I drew a triangle. So after you draw whatever shape you want, it doesn't, whatever pattern you want, you can right click on it and come down here to save custom shape. When you do that, you can give it a name. I'm gonna save it as a custom shape. I like saving it as test until I'm happy with it. And then down here under category name, you wanna put it in patterns. Okay, so you see there's patterns right there. So I'm saving test as a custom shape under patterns, say okay. You can tell I do this. So I'm replacing it. All right, so from there, I can now go back into my properties, change this, there's my test one, and there's my ugly triangle. Okay, and again, I can play with it and have it overlapped, make it do all kinds of interesting things, if not messy there. Let's see. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so you can create whatever shape you want and then adjust it. So if you want to change the pattern, you've got the wireframe there. Just start moving the wireframe around and you get different shapes. Oh, I got a funky heart going or something. I don't know what that is. Anyway, you get the idea. Okay. So you can create whatever shape you want for these pattern fills. So again, how I did that, drew a random shape, right click, save custom shape, give it a name, and tell it that you want it to be a pattern. Okay, and once you do that, you're good to go. Like I said, I usually save it as test until I'm happy with it. Can you explain how to do the cross stitch function with the design? Thank you. All right, let's see. Come back. Explore that one. So I think I had last week. Nope, the week prior. I did one a few weeks ago. Maybe it was last week. Sorry, I'm looking for, there's my cross stitch example. Okay. So, take whatever image it is that you want to do. Oh, good morning. Someone asked, why does my DesignShop Pro not respond, then shut down? It happens when I'm almost done with the design. I don't know. Most of the time, when I had random shutdowns on my computer, I was running the software on a computer that was way under capable. So it was one that didn't have a graphics card and things like that. Since I updated to the better graphics card, I've not had that problem. So I've got a faster, basically a gaming laptop is what I use. Let's see, can you fill with a motif and walk stitch pattern? Yes, you can. All right, but let me do this cross stitch. Sorry, I'm just getting distracted off the questions that are being typed in. So let's see. Any other questions? Nope. All right, so if you select your graphic, right click on it, go to cross stitch. Okay, so you bring in whatever picture you want, right click, cross stitch. From there, you can tell it however many colors you want. This is the size of the grid. So 20 points is roughly 2 millimeter boxes essentially. Okay, so if you want bigger boxes, smaller boxes, you could change your grid size. In general, cross stitches are squares, so that's what the lock is helpful for. If you don't want them, if you want them rectangles or something like that, you can get rid of the lock and make it something else. I'm going to change this to high just because, 6 colors, and say okay. And it will process the design for you, okay? Once you have it processed, now you can modify it, do whatever you want with it. So, oh, okay. All right, so from here, if you select on it, up here are all your color changes. If you want to remove things, you have to change this drop down to no color erase. And then from there, you can then start clicking on boxes of what you want to erase. If you want to change to different types of crosses, so let's say you want to do a star. Those are fun. So you can add, different shapes and click them in one at a time if you want. It'll recalculate everything. That's mainly for processing the trims. But there you go. So that was that first color that shows, which is the darker one. So you can do the stars, you can do half crosses, vertical, there's a lot, they're fun. All right, so that's what I would say is, if you want to do it by hand, you can of course draw whatever shape you want. And that I literally just clicked here and dragged my mouse around and it filled in as I went. If you want a different color, let's say I want there. I can add more colors if I'm tired of the stars and maybe I want a traditional cross. Okay, now I can do traditional crosses. Keep in mind if you go over stuff, it's going to get rid of it. Okay. So that is the cross stitch. It reprocesses to make sure it gets all the trims and whatnot, and there you've got the design. All right. So that was one that was typed in on the comments. Another one that was typed in, oh, we already answered that one. Can you fill with a motif walk stitch pattern? Yes, you can. Did I close? Yep. No. So I'm going to draw my box again. And instead of a fill, I'm going to come up here and change this to a decorative. Now, from the decoratives, there's a ton to choose from. So if you want to do different things, you can pick from the ones that are here, or, choose your own. So there's all kinds of different ones built in. And just as the same way you create the patterns for the fills, you can also create decorative stitches. So is my horsey still here? Let's see. Horse. Yep, there's the horsey. So there's one I did. That's a motif that I drew. So with these decoratives, what you want to do is draw your shape, making sure your start and stop are on the same line. All right, so whatever shape you're going to draw, I'm going to start here and then use your left clicks, right clicks, whatever you're going to do. And let's say I'm going to make, that is so ugly. That's okay. All right, I'm going to make it stop there. Right click on it. I'm going to save custom shape. I'm going to call it test because that's what I do. Decorative. Right here, instead of custom shape, I save it as a decorative and say okay. Of course, it's going to replace whatever mess I have there. And then I can come down here and change it to test, and there's the ugly shape I just did. And just like the others, I can move this around, play with the spacing, any of that. I don't like that. All right, this one I shouldn't have messed with. This one though I can. So you can do whatever you want to get the different decorative patterns through there. Okay. How do I digitize an EPS with DesignShop, not Pro, trying to use Wizard and not getting anywhere? So EPS. So let's go open, see, designs, graphics. There's an EPS. I gotta get more EPSs, so I better. All right, so I don't like using the wizard myself. Actually, I don't remember what this, let me change my security on this because I don't remember what's only available on DesignShop, and I might show you a pro trick. So let me quick reopen DesignShop. Now it's gonna behave as if it's, what I just did, ignore it. It's something you guys can't do. I changed my level, so now that I don't have Pro Plus, so I can see what it is you can do. EPS. Okay, so typically when I'm working with EPSs, rather than using Wizard, I'll take the vector, select it, I'll come over to whatever stitch direction I want, left click and drag, and poof, I have stitches. Okay, and I can do the same thing with all these. So that's how I tend to do it, is rather than using the wizard, I just go through it step by step to make sure that the stitches are doing what I want, that the, it's going to sew in the order that I expect it to, and so on. So that's literally all I do with this, is select the vector, click on it with a left click, choose my insert stitch direction, and add stitch directions until I'm happy with it. Okay, and just keep going through your design doing it that way. Now with the wizard, what you would want to do is, where is the wizard? There it is. Graphic to embroidery assistant. So how many colors do you want it to have for next? What's the first color you want to stitch? That red. If you want it, you'd say next. It's going to show you the order it stitches in. It's going to do this first, then that. Up here it's just it's a wizard. It's going to step you one by one through this. So now you would do your stitch directions. So let's say I want that stitch direction there and those two stitch directions. Next. All right, what color next? That color. Okay. So now again it shows the order that it's going to sew in. Next, I got to give it stitch directions. There. Okay, so it's just a wizard that walks you through it. So if at any point you hit cancel, then now you'll see what it just did. I just got those three things done. Okay, so did that help any, Jeff? Hopefully it did. So I'm going to go change my... Hi, James. All right, so let me go change it back to Pro Plus, close this, and there, Pro Plus, apply, okay, close that, no. And then we'll go back to my questions. Which ones do we have? All right, so we covered that, Once I set up my colors, I get this message and it kicks me out. I'm not sure why. I don't have that. I've never seen that. So the best thing I could suggest is make sure your files don't have, oh, great, Jeff. So you got to add the stitch directions. Yep. Let's see. Once I set up my colors, I get this message. It kicks me out. I would suggest making sure you don't have any of those blank trims or the empty steps or anything like that, that your stitch file is clean. And then if it still does that, the best thing I could suggest is call tech support. They're fantastic. Without looking at it directly, I'm not sure I can give you a, waha, you got to do this, and it works. But they can log into your computer and, figure it out for you, whether it's, or get you to the right person who can. All right. This one was sent in this morning. It was, hey, I didn't copy the actual question, but I have this. How do I clean up this for? The corners of this. It's doing stitching around and it's really blocky, too many stitches in a small area. How do I fix it? Okay, so file, open. Let's go get, I made an example earlier. There. Okay, so similar to this, I've got this sort of thing going on. How do I fix that? Okay, well, this one is just a lettering random one on the computer. It's not digitized, so that's the main reason that's happening, that it's auto-digitized. It's, you know, just poofing stitches in, and now we got to fix it. So what I did to fix it was I right-clicked on it and went to Operations, Convert Object to Wireframe. Now I got this thing into something I can work with. All right, now that did convert over as a column. So columns, well, I could, well, yeah, I'm going to leave it like that. So let's just go look at it. So I want to clean up this. Well, it's always a good idea to just try. I know it's not going to work here, but I just wanted to point it out. If you got smaller angles, sometimes the corners tool will work if it's a complex, or sorry, a single line, but these are columns, so that's not going to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and insert, basically split this element. So I'm going to click here and let's say right here. All right, so I'm going to select that point and say split element at selected points. Okay, so now I've got a bottom and a top. So from here, I can clean up this top spot really easy by just playing with the stitch directions, or yeah, I'm going to clean that up by pulling this down, deleting that. Maybe I don't want to delete that. There we go. I'll delete this one. Okay, and then I'm going to change it just because I like it. I'm going to do an auto split because I like it. All right, so now let's look at this guy down here. The stitches are kind of weird. I'm going to go operation. Another way, instead of right click operations, change type, right here, change element from one type to another. I'm going to tell this to be a complex fill, replace. And now I have stitch directions I can delete. So I'm going to delete that, delete that. Hey, now they're going all this direction. I like that better. So now I can just clean up my wireframe and we'll be good to go. Oops, move my start so I can actually click on the wireframe point. And let's move this guy up. Okay, so, and that's coming in as satin. I don't want that. I'm going to change that to an auto split. Apply. Okay, so there's a lot of different things you can do. This one, again, I've got fill on top of fill. Let's say I don't want that. So what would I do with this guy? Well, it's again a column. So I'm going to add a point. And right here, I'm going to split element at selected points. Add another one, split element. And then this guy I'm just going to delete. So now it's going to sew from there. It ends, start, end. Then I'm going to go a straight running stitch over here. That one starts, and I'm going to make it start and end on this side. So now I'm really just thinking about cleaning this up. What do I need to do? How would I want this to stitch, right? So let's first make the stitch types all, I don't want, there, I like that one better. Auto split I just like, I think it's pretty. So, okay, so how do we make this now sew, not messy? All right, well, let's give it another color so I can actually see what's going on. There. All right, so I'm going to delete that. We don't need it. So it sews this bottom one. It starts there, it ends there. We do a running stitch up. It's going to sew this guy, start, finish. The next one, it's going over there. Nope, let's move this one up. So all I'm doing is reordering this so that it sews without any trims. Because who likes lettering that has trims midway? There. That's cute. Got to clean up that, but that's okay. So if I insert auto trims, so I update auto trims, which is this button right here, and all I did was rearrange things and move my starts and stops. So if you didn't catch what I was doing, right here is a start stop. I put the start where the propeller is, that's where my previous element ended, and I put the stop near where I want the next thing to be. Okay. Can you show how to do shading, like blending of different colors gradually over one another? So that was typed in. So blending is a lot of fun. I did some fire this week, which turned out really cool. So first thing I would say is, I'm going to rotate that up. I'll just make fake fire. All right. So let's say I want that, and the top of my fire, I want yellow, and now I need to blend, right? So I don't want it to be this blocky thing. I want it to actually blend up into it. So what do you do with that? Well, all right, so you would play with not only your blending. So if I double click on this under effects, you can go turn on custom densities and you can apply that. Okay, so when you do things like that, you'll see you can play with them so that it's exponential, it's different. If you turn on blend, it'll give it 2 colors. So then I can actually say 2 colors. So you see, now I've got a blend going where I've got the red and orange overlapping. And again, you can play with those densities. When I'm doing blends, I like to leave on auto apply so that I can drag these around in real time, see what's happening with the blends. Okay, now if you want a third color, well, what do you do then? Well, you add a third color. So you draw whatever shape so that you're trying to add to it. Give it a start and a stop and a stitch direction. And let's make that yellow. And I'm going to go back into the properties. Instead of go into effects, turn on the custom blending, turn off all that underlay, because I'm going to have to deal with that separate. And then if I go back to the blend, notice I can reverse it. So you can make sure that you're getting, you know, some before it gets into the deeper fill up here. Now, is there any magic to it? It really is working with it, trying things, see what looks nice to you, looking at the thread colors, making sure that, let's say if you're trying to do fire, rather than just going red, yellow, red, orange, yellow, maybe you would want it, or yellow, orange, red, maybe you'd want to use a yellow and orange and orangey red. So an orangey yellow and orangey red, and then the red. So that by adding the different colors, you can ease that transition over there. Adding some randomness along it also helps it look a little more blended. You also want to play with your stitch directions, stitch lengths, because the smaller the stitch length, the more it kind of buries into it. So to try to force that blending look, if you have your upper layers having smaller stitch lengths, it's going to bury it into the other stitching a little more, if that makes sense. All right, so Nate had wrote a really nice article up on Melco's blog on blending. I would highly recommend checking that out. And I think he's also done a few, he did a Wednesday session that had a horse as well, where he did the different blending through there. There you go. So someone just put in a link in the comments, so check that out on an article on how doing shading, how to deal with different shading. It's, you know, the best thing you can do is sew it out, see what you like, see what you don't, and adjust accordingly. Okay, what other questions? So those are the typed in ones, so let me go back to my list. Okay. I know both of these types are expanded, but is there any difference between the DST and the EXP? You're welcome, MJ. So DST and EXP as far as their ability to edit them in DesignShop. So DSTs don't have trims in them. They have jump stitches, which is why when sometimes you don't have trims where you think they're supposed to be trims, because the software has to count up the number of jumps and guess whether that's supposed to be a trim or an actual jump. EXPs have trim info. So as far as which ones to look at, which is preferred or easier to work with, if you're just trying to work with them to fix trims and jumps and things like that, start with your EXPs. It has trim information in it, so it'll be easier to deal with. So predominantly for that reason, EXPs is what I would suggest. Okay. I've purchased a design with a bunch of layers of thread. Okay, so a multicolor design. And on one color I'm getting thread breaks, but the thread is not broken. Any suggestions? I just restart each time. It's happening a bunch of times. Okay, so what I would look at that is, depending on the stitch type, you might have your act feed too high. So let's say you have your act feed at 10 and it's doing a bunch of really tiny stitches for an outline. The tiny stitches are not long enough for the sensor to be able to realize that you actually made a stitch and it's not just a loop of thread not catching, so it thinks it's a thread break. So what I would suggest for that is make sure your active feed is correct, right, for the application. If you're getting a bunch of false thread breaks, make sure your bobbin tension is good. And particularly because it's one color, look at what type of stitching that is and try playing with your active feed some. Since they're false thread breaks, I probably would lower your active feed a little and see how that works. How do I resize larger designs from Decorative design book that we already have digitized, make them smaller without getting them to slow out so tightly? Okay, so that, I think we're going to add a session specific to just scaling to kind of talk about this in a lot more detail, because there's a lot here that we could go over. But scaling stuff down, if I'm just going to hold a thumb in the air and say a general rule of thumb, is you really only want to scale designs that you purchase or that are from other places no more than 10 to 20%. Some people say up to 30%. But the more you scale them up, the more you're going to move the stitches out. The more you scale it down, the more compact all the stitching is going to get, right? So the general rule of thumb is try not to scale things too much one way or the other, because when you start compacting it down, all your stitches get really close together, and as you're seeing, things get denser. And sometimes you'll end up with sewing problems with puckering and whatnot. Your better case is to go and have it redigitized for the size you want, particularly if you're making large jumps. I mean, if you think about it, what I'm going to do on the back of a jacket, for a really large, 12, 14-inch design, if I'm going to try to do that same design as a 3-inch left chest logo, I'm going to have to do something different. The back of the jacket is going to have more fill types, things like that, whereas my little left chest is going to be a whole lot more satin stitches and running stitches. So you really have to digitize for the size design you want. Now, if it's an OFM file, you can scale it and the properties will change. If it's expanded, then the software will adjust somewhat with the expanded properties on there. You can always play with the densities. So right click scale, this is not expanded, but on an expanded file down here, all of these you can play with on the densities. So you can adjust it somewhat there. Same with pull compensation if you need to do pull compensation adjustments. And again, how you do that, you select whatever element has too many stitches, too few, go into right click properties, go to the scale tab, and then down here. Okay. You'd play with the scale factors. So that would be kind of where I'd start with, but I mean, depending on the design, scaling it way down is not really a good feasible option, just based on the types of stitches that they're doing. How do you make stripy text, and how do you do puff letters? All right, puff letters, there is a whole lot of great information that's been recorded on how to do puff designs in general. It really boils down to the digitizing. Make sure that you're pinching the text, and that you have appropriate underlay, although it's a different type of underlay. You're not going to do a traditional whole big underlay because that's going to compress your foam. So there's digitizing for puff is typically one letter at a time. You think about it, you digitize it, move to your next letter, digitize it by hand. It's a manual process. There's a bunch of good articles that have been written on there. I have a link here. Hopefully we'll get them typed into the comments for you so you have something to click on rather than staring at my little PowerPoint here. How do you make striped text? So this is like putting a thin green line or something like that on text. So what I did is close that, open, boo. All right, I digitized some stripes, or I digitized boo, figured it's Halloween, be funny, Let me change the background to make it easier to see, there. All right, so we have boo, and if I put it in 3D, there. All right, so what do we do? So pretend the whole text is not partially done. I went ahead and partially did it for you. And just as a reminder, the comments on Puff are over in a link to the article is over in the comments on the video on Facebook. All right, so how do you kind of add stripes or break text apart into different things? Well, first, decide where you're going to break it apart. So in this case, I did candy corn stripes. And I like using these vector lines to decide where it's going to be. So I can hold my alternate key down on my keyboard, and when I left click and drag across, you can see it leaves a line. And all you're doing is setting up where it is you're going to be breaking the text apart. Okay, so just to do some, wherever you want to put them, you'll decide that. That's just for consistency, particularly if you have multiple letters. If you're just doing one, you know, pick it on the grid and call it good. But I drew these little red ones and decided that's where I was going to break it apart. So now we've got to do something. If you used a font, you're going to have to convert it over into a wireframe. So remember, you do that by right-click, select the lettering, go to Operations, convert object to wireframe. I just digitize this by hand rather than messing with it. So I already have the wireframe. Okay, so what do we do to split it? Well, I'm going to start down here and zoom in so I can see my little lines. So I've got my shape, I've got my little red line, and what I want to do is select the shape, and I'm going to left click to add a point. I already have a point there, so I'm going to leave it. I'm going to add a point there where it intersects with the red line, and another one there. All right, so now I select one point, I hold the Control key down on my keyboard, and I left click on the next triangle over here. So now I've got two that are highlighted black. You could also use this custom point selection tool and just draw a circle around those 2 points. If you don't remember how to use the Control, I usually just use Control. Once those are both selected, right here you've got the boxes with the arrows. The one right next to it is a circle cut in half. That is split element at the selected points. So if you click on that, now it's split it. I'm going to ignore what's going on at the moment with all the stitching. I'm going to select there, holding my Control key, split element at selected points. All right, my background being black is going to not work. Let's do gray. Okay, so now how do we fix that one part? Well, first off, when it's selected, see all these little dash lines? Those are stitch directions that don't make a whole lot of sense anymore. So I select the shape, click on my stitch direction, and I'm just going to go delete the extraneous ones because we don't need all these. They're not in our wireframe anyway. You could convert this over to a vector, but notice and then it'll get rid of them, so you'll be left with this. When there are no stitch directions, what does that leave you with? Just a vector. So now I can left click and drag and add my stitch directions. Okay. All right, so now I have the bottom. Well, now we got to do the next one. So go to the top one, and again, I'm going to zoom in on this little area and add my points. So left click, hold my Control key down, split element at selected points. I'm going to do the same thing here. As you're doing this, ignore all the nonsense. I had all kinds of splits and a bunch of stitch directions on here, which is why it's freaking out, and that's okay. Okay, so now I've got a top and a bottom. All right, so this part here and here are supposed to be yellow, so I'm going to make those, right? I think, yeah. So I'm going to make those yellow, and then that top part's white. So now I just like cleaning it up and working on the stitch directions. So select the shape you want to modify, click on all your different stitch directions, get rid of them just by hitting your delete key, and then play around with it until you like the look. I like that. All right, this side over here, notice I've got these overlaps. How do we do that? Okay, so I'm going to zoom in here, and right this one is insert splice. So I'm going to change that to insert curved splice. Left click on one edge of the wire. Oh, I don't like that point. Let's do here. There. Insert a stitch splice. I'm going to do another one here. Okay, so now I got some splices in. And now, again, I'm going to go mess with my stitch directions. So I want my stitches running that way, I want them going this way and that way. That's better. So now, by inserting those splice lines right there, you see I can get that overlapping look. All right, what about what happened up here? Again, notice all the random stitch directions. So I select the shape, click on Insert Stitch Directions. Notice they're all over the place. Okay. I can't make stitches go this way, and it doesn't compute. So that's what you're seeing. So I'm going to delete all these stitch directions. Again, you can convert this to a vector first if you don't want to hit delete. And I'm going to go ahead and again insert my curve splice from here to, let's say there. Okay, so now I just got to change over to my stitch Ooh, I don't want to move it. I want to add a stitch direction. There we go. And I can add the different stitch directions to these different segments. That's cute. There. And now I get, again, that overlacing splice look. Okay, and then you can, of course, turn off all these vectors and see what you got. So it's just a matter of, typically those fonts and things that you see that have a stripe down the middle of the text, it's all manually digitized, letter by letter. And this, you just work through it just like I did here. Okay. Now, things you can think about too. Like, let's look at this B. I already did this. But notice different tricks to make this sew out right. One, it helps if you do a full underlay of the entire letter with with your first color. Okay, that just helps prevent gapping between the different segments. And then you want to make sure you're thinking about your starts and stops, right? So if I do that whole underlay, I start down here, I end up here. My next one, I make it start. It's the same color, so I'm starting near the propeller, and I'm going to end down here. So what does that let me do? I still have more white for the top of my B. So I can then do a running stitch, which I've already done here, but you can see it's going down across something that's going to get covered later, so that now I can sew this guy starting here and ending there. What is that? That's just thinking about the pathing to minimize a trim, because there's no reason to have a trim between here and here when I can just keep my machine running at a high speed. So over here, sew this all continuously without a trim. If you update your trims, you'll see there's no trim there. Means good job, we did it. All right, well then my orange. So the orange down here, and then sew all my yellow. Okay, so doing an underlay first over the full letter can help prevent gapping between things. Even if it's just a center walk, it's better than nothing. So, all right, what other questions? Hopefully that was helpful. Where did my questions go? Oh, I closed them. Oops. All right, I'll just bring it over here. Okay, so I think that was all of them. We did that. Resizing, we talked about that. We talked about striping of text and how to do 3D puff letters. We put a link out there for you. Okay, let me quick look and see if any other questions were sent on YouTube. All right, Dan hasn't sent me any, so I assume there's none. All right. And I got all the ones that were typed in. Excellent. Any other questions that I can help answer for you guys today? Give it a minute, a few seconds, see if anyone types anything in. So remember, you can send these questions in on whenever you want, type them in on the previous thread. Some of the ones that I have from today are actually questions that were typed in after the fact on last week's. So I try to make sure I review those to get any questions answered for you. And you can email them to applications@melco.com. Type them in on the threads. A day or two before the actual live talk, I tend to post in some of the groups asking for whatever questions you might have. So you can type them in there, but have fun with it. It's a really powerful tool. You can do lots of things with it. So hopefully getting your questions answered, and you're enjoying it. I guess we'll talk to you next time. So happy end of September. I guess fall's coming. It's actually been nice weather here. Florida, it's been hot as ever, but it's actually been nice and cool the past few days. It's been nice for running. All right. Well, you guys have a fantastic afternoon, and I will talk to you guys next week. Next week, it'll be on Thursday. Okay, so it'll be next Thursday, same time, same place, same page. I will talk to you again then. Bye.